All right, so not too long ago, you sent me a text. I think it was last week.
Yeah.
It was like a post on X, and it was so fascinating, which led to a brand new podcast show, which I'm so excited to go over. And it's something that comes up quite often, not with just clients, but comes up with advisors.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you think about the pulse of what we do, which is dividend investing, most often the sentiment is it's for old people. It's for somebody who's retired. It's a conservative investment that doesn't really grow, and it's just I want to grow my money. Here's the sentiment that I hear from so many advisors. I'm gonna be growth investing until my clients get ready to retire, and then I'll convert.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll bring the money, or we'll start doing it, a few years. We'll start investing in this dividend thing a few years before we...
But I want to grow my money before then.
Actually need it for retirement.
And, you ever seen those movies where, somebody gets super, frustrated and you see the steam come out of it? Whenever I hear that argument, that's me. Like, this steam starts coming out and it's like, and I don't mean this to be insulting, but I'm like, bro, you have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, hey, I'm going to get further ahead doing this, but the reality is you're not, because statistics show very clearly that over the long haul, growth investing loses 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But they're like, well, it just feels like it's going to work better. So I know more than you, so I'm going to do this. And then when I get to close to retirement, then, I'll adopt something that you're doing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how bad that is.
Because that's when I'll need income, right? So they just see that dividend as just taking the cash.
Yeah.
They forget that you can be reinvesting that all those years.
All those years. So today's topic is dividend investing for young investors. Ta-da! So I'm super excited to talk about this because it's, for a lot of the clients that are out there are older investors, or just the not young investors. This is for everybody. I mean, dividend investing can be adopted by somebody like a Warren Buffett, who's significantly older than a lot of us. And then you have a lot of young investors that want to build wealth, want to do something, and they're like, hey, I just want to grow my money. I don't want to adopt an old people philosophy. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The tweet, what do you call them now?
I don't know. The X.
The post on
the
X.
post. There we go.
It was super cool. So here it is. Coca-Cola, KO, the company out of Georgia. They went public in 1919. Super crazy. Where you could buy a single share in 1919 for $40. If you think about that, that was an enormous amount of money. I bet you that's like, I don't know, $1,000 or something. It's a lot of money for one share. And I wish my grandpa would have bought me one share. It could have, that would have been
his annual
that would have been pretty amazing. So put one share in Coca-Cola in 1919. So just buy, let's just say, you had a good amount of money and you bought one share for every single grandkid or child that you had. By the end of 2022, which I thought it was the footer in that document, it stated the total value of that one share, $40. That one share would have turned into about $21 million total value. And Coca-Cola is an aristocrat. It's been paying dividends forever.
It's like 65 years, 68 years.
That's been paying a dividend and increasing.
And just increasing the dividend that long.
It's been paying since it came out. That annual dividend yield on that $40 stock is $600,000 a year. That's not total.
No.
That's just now. Like, can you imagine investing $40, turning it into $21 million? Now, it took a century.
Right.
Like, it's not like it was like, 2 days later.
That is the definition of crockpot.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I got a couple books coming out this year. And in the second book, which is for investors, my editor's going over some of the stories, and he's like, great, compelling argument to set up the beginning of the book. And he's like, but dude, it took 100 years to get there. Can we use a time frame that's a little shorter? It's being a little funny.
Yeah.
And I'm like, duly noted. And I understand when you hear this right now, it's 100 years. But the point is, if you don't start 100 years ago, you can't buy this 10 years ago and turn $40 into 21 million. Now, very few people are going to have 100 years to invest. But the point that we're making here is that if you take time and add that to dividend strategy, you get this type of result. This is one share. This is why Warren Buffett is synonymous with the greatest investor of all time, because he uses this to his advantage. He invests in stuff that pays income and he sits on it.
Yep. And allows that to reinvest, purchase more shares, or purchase more companies.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the guys that's sitting on the most cash right now. I think he's at the highest level he's ever had of cash. And he's just waiting for opportunities to deploy that and make it earn even more for him.
So why start dividend investing for young people? So if young investors out there listening, why in the world would they want to start? Because if you think about the stocks that started at nothing and just exploded, like the Amazons, right? Microsoft millionaires. How do you motivate, incentivize a young investor to say, hey, I know that's exciting. I know you want to get rich tomorrow, but the tortoise over here is doing incredible things. It just might not feel that because this is a great example. We can show you so many examples over a 20-year period that have, I mean, not that crazy amount that you turn $40 into 21 million is extreme.
Yeah.
But you start shrinking that down and you start to see substantial amounts of growth over 15, 25 years, which is awesome for young people, where you can build substantial amount of retirement income starting when you're in your 20s and 30s building your career. If you start then, the amount of income and value that you're going to have when you retire is like, you won't believe the numbers.
No.
We've shown so many young investors that come into office, will build a simplicity plan, show the dividend investing, and they're like, that's not real. They have good jobs that are saving $25,000 a year in their 401k.
I just don't believe you.
Yeah. They're like, this is gibberish. There's no way that's going to happen.
Well, I think for me, and why I like dividend investing, your dividend portfolios bring to life a couple of the key principles that, like, my parents told me or friends have told me, and even other advisors about investing as a whole, just general terms. One thing was just start investing. And most of the time they're talking about growth, right? So start investing, continue to buy, whether it's up or down the market, continue to just buy and store away money, because we know over the long haul, at least as history has shown, over the long haul, it continues to go up and grow. And then also, this is just a principle, we want to buy low, sell high, and try to time that market a little bit. Sometimes it's hard, but everyone kind of wants that. So when you look at a dividend portfolio and you're reinvesting the dividend, you're constantly purchasing because you have a dividend being paid out and you're reinvesting. You don't really care where the market's at because it's going up and down each time that you have that reinvestment going on. So you're able to buy, especially over a long period of time, you're continually buying more shares. And, oh, by the way, if the market does go down, you've timed it because now you can have more shares. Compound interest is your friend. That's why you start now. Because, I think everyone in finance class or economics class got that, hey, I'm going to invest for 10 years and then stop and let it grow for 30 years. Versus the person who waits 10 years and then invests for the next 20 years, and it can't catch up to the person who had invested early on, even though they stopped. Well, this is the same thing. That compounding interest effect, the compounding dividend being reinvested, plus compounding growth, it really sets you apart.
And that story that you were talking about, there was an acronym for it, like Procrastinating Pete and Eager Eddie or something like that.
Yeah.
And the guy who invested $10,000 in the first 10 years of their career amassed significantly more money than the person that invested $100,000 over the latter part of their career.
Correct. Yeah.
And, you got a 10 times, procrastination. Now you waited 10 years, but the guy who started early wins.
Yes.
And he invests 10% of the value. So the earlier you start, the better. Have you ever seen the movie Sabrina? I know it's a rom-com, but
I don't think so.
I'm a rom-com like a lover.
Oh boy.
But I will say, like, my wife likes the actions and I like chick flicks. But that's a movie that's, I don't know, the first one that was filmed was back in the 30s or 40s or 50s, maybe 40s or 50s. And then they remade it back in the 90s. It's a story about the chauffeur and his daughter and then the wealthy family, and the chauffeur's daughter ends up marrying the super successful rich kid. In the movie, the chauffeur, the dad, at some point tells the daughter, "You don't need them." And she's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, I've been, the chauffeur making a minimum wage for my whole career. They've treated us well, but I've paid attention driving Mr. Whoever to the office every day. And when he bought certain things, I bought them. And when he sold certain things, I sold them." And he goes, "I was in a good position and I just paid attention. We didn't have much, but I put whatever we had to work." And he goes, it doesn't matter the value, but they had amassed millions of dollars by buying little bits. This company was buying billions, right?
Mhm.
And he was buying hundreds. And yet he turned those hundreds into millions just by paying attention. The reason why I'm bringing this up is there's, you're like, well, that's in the movies. That'll never happen. But then there's a guy, a real life story. His name's Ronald Reed, not Reagan. And he's a janitor who never made more than a minimum wage. And he just invested little bits of money on a monthly basis, bought dividend stocks, and amassed over $8 million during his investing career that he started when he was super young in his 20s, buying individual dividend stocks, amassed over $8 million with an enormous amount of dividend income. He retired on more income than he had when he was working because of his habits of investing. Now, I know I'm using an example of a movie, but there's real life examples of people who have done the exact same thing.
Yep.
Where they started little. But the key here is they all started when they were young, and they built these huge fortunes. I mean, think about that. A janitor, a guy emptying trash, okay, who a lot of times kids make fun of, was a millionaire 8 times over because he saved his little acorns, into things that really grew and created income and built wealth over time. And the magic behind that story, and if you Google stories like that, you will notice one common thread, that the vast majority buy dividend income.
Yep.
Very seldom will you will see lots of millionaire stories of people that start at a startup and got that startup cash, but it's because they were granted and gifted shares at a startup. Without the startup scenario, almost 100% of the time, it's people who are buying dividend income at a young age and reinvested and watch that turned into a huge amount of wealth.
Well, it's the way to compound your own money, right? Yeah. Like you may only be able to give $50 a month, but that $50 then goes and buys shares of companies that'll give you, let's just call it another $10. Well, every time, and it just continues to grow and build, and it's that snowball effect that everyone likes to talk about on the growth side, but it is true on the income side as well, and on that dividend, and it's real cash. It doesn't have the same volatility typically as the normal market. You're not going to wake up and tomorrow, most likely, your whole portfolio is dropped by 10% because all these companies have cut a dividend.
So I had a client review last week, and it was a super fun review. It is a client who, the last time we met, they were living in Charlotte. The wife had retired, and the husband was working. And then, the next time we do a review, they don't live in Charlotte anymore. The husband's retired and the wife's working. And I was like, what? Just everything flipped upside down. This is crazy. And they're like, our scenario, our plan that we had planned on is now upside down. They've been a client for many years. And they're like, are we okay? Like, now what we thought was this direction is now this direction. And we don't have the income that we used to. Like, my job is not making very much money. His job that he was making good money, he doesn't do anymore. He's working part-time, making a few bucks.
Right.
Are we gonna be able to retire? We just got forced into this situation. And we look at their plan and we look at their dividend, and I'm like, you're reinvesting right now. When you work, you have a 401k for a lot of people, and then you have a match, right? And as long as you put in this amount of money, they're going to give you that amount of money. And we look at their plan. I'm like, we've created a dividend income, and on your investments, you're taking some withdrawals right now, but do you know how much excess you have? Like, no. I'm like, you have an extra $35,000 a year, and the $35,000 is like your 401k match that these companies are paying you, not only the amount of money you're getting on a monthly basis, but an additional $35,000 a year that you're able to reinvest into your portfolio to grow. So even though you're not working, husband,
Yep.
and you are working at a not the greatest, you love your job, you don't make much.
Yeah.
You know, they're on the threshold of retirement. You're still saving $35,000 a year to reinvest your portfolio. We ran all the numbers. Everything looked wonderful, even though their retirement got flipped completely upside down. They're still saving $35,000 a
They just
year.
don't think of it that way, but it's so true. It's like, oh, I just can't. I mean, I've had very similar conversations. We can't put any away this year. We had some things come up, and it's like, okay, but you did.
Yeah.
You know, you put $25,000 away because that's what you have coming in your dividend income, and they're like, oh, we didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like that's real money that you're getting.
That's my favorite conversation to have. And the point here is, young investors, you don't have that if you don't start young.
Right.
If you're in growth investments, there is no paycheck that you get to reinvest every single year. When the market's up and things are high, you're not buying at the high point. Or on the flip side, when things are really, really bad, there's no extra money going in. You want to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So in this type of environment, there's always excess if you buy quality. There's always excess that you get to reinvest, whether you're working or not, or in between jobs, or you have that period where like, I just left that job and I'm this job and I can't get into the 401k for 6 months. You know, I'm going to lose that time. You don't.
Right.
You have all of this dividend that's continuing to be reinvested. And you can be one of those stories like that janitor or somebody who's super successful that's making all kinds of money that you're like, yeah, I know I'm only 40 years old, but I'm investing like $30,000 in addition to all the money that I'm making because of my dividends. And by the time I'm retired, that's going to be like $150,000 or $200,000 of annual income.
Right.
Get a little hot here. So, okay, let's give some practical steps of what a young investor who's not necessarily going to hire somebody like us, but somebody like what could we tell them to go do on their own? What are they going to buy?
Definitely. If you don't know this by now, find some dividend-paying stocks.
But what kind of dividend stocks?
I would look for not just someone who pays a dividend, but has a history, go 10, 15, 20 years of consistently increasing their dividend.
And those are called aristocrats.
Well, no, the aristocrat's just the one who's been paying for 25 years. Take it one step further. Do the research and make sure that they're increasing it as well, because that will help. That helps even more. It's like getting a pay raise every year. And
it's okay to start small. Like you're like, hey, I got this dead end job, or I don't really like it's not my real career, and you just have like $100, $200 at the end of the month, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. That's okay. They have apps like Acorn and
buy a share.
Yeah. That most of the stories,
never know where it might land.
A lot of the stories we're talking, one share of Coca-Cola like turned into millions of dollars.
Yep.
And don't think you're never going to amass much if you don't put in a ton. The reality is, if you put in little bits over a long period of time, it turns into a massive amount of money.
That's right.
So don't be afraid to start small, and then make sure you have the reinvestment automatic.
Yes.
So that's the beauty of technology, where every month or quarter or however the dividend pays, it can be automatically reinvested. You don't have to remember anything. You just have to make sure that when you buy it, you have automatic reinvestment turned on.
Yep. And that's one of the cool ways to where you don't have to buy whole shares as well. They'll give you partial shares.
You can do a partial share.
Yeah.
Any last information to go away here? Key takeaway?
No, I would just say, you build a house one brick at a time. You can build your portfolio one stock at a time. So do some homework, pick some great stocks, and just get started.
Yeah. My last bit is go. Like right now. Like don't waste any time. You don't need anybody. You can go buy it on your own. I mean, it's never a bad idea to have somebody that understands this in your life, but at the end of the day, just get started.
That's right.
Thanks for watching.